right, and this is my book talk about the talent code written by Daniel Coyle. In the book, it talks about how people can grow talent using certain mechanisms in the brain. It shows that right in the front cover when it says greatness isn't born, it's grown, here's how, which I think is a really good hook to just like grab the reader's attention and want to learn how to further their talent. As stated by Coyle, this book is divided into 3 parts: deep practice, ignition, and master coaching, which correspond to the 3 basic elements of the talent code. Each element is useful on its own, but their convergence is the key to creating skill. Remove one and the process slows, combine them even for 6 minutes, and things begin to change. That's just kind of like his introduction to like the start of the talent code and like all the different elements. And I think he does a really good job of just kind of like explaining what what will happen if you use all 3 and what will happen if you use like 1 or 2. And he does a really good job to just kind of like explain it in just one tiny little paragraph. And I just wanted to include it to kind of like start off my book talk about the talent code. So let's start off with the first element, which is deep practice. In the book, it defines deep practice as struggling and making a mistake and then correcting that mistake until perfect and then just continuing this process. I didn't really understand it at first, but it kind of gave a really good example of a sheet of, if you're practicing a sheet of music, you would start off at the beginning and work through the sheet of music until you make an error. And then once you make that error, you just continuously practice that error until it's perfect. And then you would just continue this process until you're done with the sheet. So the talent code talks a lot about myelin, which is like a big part of just kind of like the world, because we definitely talked about it in biology, and it was just kind of cool to see it talked about in like psychology and how it just kind of like works more towards like talent and more towards like the brain. So myelin is a little tricky to understand. Definitely, I thought it was hard in biology too to understand, but Coyle does a really good job of explaining it. He says that every human movement, thought, or feeling is a precisely timed electric signal traveling through a chain of neurons, a circuit of nerve fibers. Myelin is the insulation that wraps these nerve fibers and increases signal strength, speed, and accuracy. The more we fire a particular circuit, the more myelin optimizes that circuit, and the stronger, faster, and more fluent our movements and thoughts become. So, as I said, he just does a really good job of kind of like furthering the talk about myelin, just kind of helping the reader understand. And basically, myelin is talent, talent is myelin. The more myelin you have, the more myelin you have, the more talent you have, the more talent you have, the more myelin you have. And just kind of like deep practicing will help wrap the myelin around the circuits, and it'll just kind of like further your talent. Another big topic talked about the book is the talent hotbeds, a talent hotbed is like a small and possibly unusual place, but produces such like extraordinary results. An example of this in the book, which again helped me really understand, was Brazil. And Brazil, like as we know, is really like popular in soccer. Like they just produce extraordinary soccer players. And in the book, it talked about how researcher Simon Clifford saw something that like he didn't expect to see, which was a game similar to soccer, but the ball was half the size and a lot heavier than a normal soccer ball, and it was solid and didn't bounce. The players also played on concrete, and there were only 5 to 6 players on each side compared to the 11 players in normal soccer. This game places the Brazil players in their deep practice zone, which will kind of help further their actual ability in soccer. Which is the reason why Brazil is such a talent hotbed, because they use this mechanism. Like a lot of the kids start young playing this different game, and it'll kind of like just help further them do better in soccer, and it's like really helping just fire those circuits and wrap that myelin around. So the next element of the talent code is ignition, which I think is the most important personally to me. Like if you're not ignited, I feel like the other things just don't really work at all. Like I feel like how he talks about everything needs, or like you can have 1 or 2 and it'll work, but I feel like if you have deep practice and master coaching but no ignition, I feel like that just doesn't work at all. That's my own personal opinion though. But ignition helps inspire deep practice, and Coyle again explains this very well. Some of the book was kind of confusing to understand, but he just kind of further gave examples, and I think just defined kind of like words, just kind of like all the elements perfectly together. He says that Ignition and deep practice work together to produce skill in exactly the same way that a gas tank combines with an engine to produce velocity in an automobile. Ignition supplies the energy, while deep practice translates that energy over time into forward progress, aka Raps of Milan. So, again, he just really explains that well for me. I don't know if it's the same way for everybody, but definitely throughout the book I was a little confused, and he just definitely really helped. He also gave a really good example which helped, which is Roger Bannister, who was the first man to run a mile in 4 minutes. But about a week after he did it, another man did the exact same thing. And then the next season, more runners did it. But they weren't really talked about as much as Roger Bannister, obviously, since he was the first one. But these other men were able to run the mile in 4 minutes because they saw Roger Bannister as an ignition. He ignited them because the men saw that it was actually humanly possible to run that mile in 4 minutes. And just over time, multiple people just started doing it too because they were ignited. This could also maybe be referred to as a primal cue, which the book talks about a lot too. And a primal cue is kind of the same thing as when you're born, you're just kind of given a cue to kind of it's more like ignition, I guess. And these are a little bit confusing to me, but again, Daniel Coyle gave a really good example of younger siblings. If you're a younger sibling and you have older siblings, you would kind of the primal cue is to kind of catch up to what they're doing. And it actually gave really cool statistics where all these athletes are actually the younger of their group. So maybe they have 5 or 6 siblings, they're at the lower half, which I thought was really cool to think about because these athletes were just given the primal cue to hurry up, and as the book said, you're behind and you need to catch up, and I guess they just kind of surpassed their siblings, which I thought was really cool. Another big aspect of this book was KIPP schools, and they really focus on ignition more than anything else. I think they do focus on deep practice and stuff, but I feel ignition is their number one priority. And I thought it was really cool that they talked about KIPP schools because in the book I read last semester, The Marshmallow Test, they talked about KIPP schools as well. And I guess they're just a big thing in psychology and just children's nowadays. I had never heard of them before, my books and stuff. And they're definitely really interesting to me, and I definitely want to look further into them. They just look really cool. In the Marshmallow Test, they talked about the delay of gratification is what the KIPP schools were trying to do. But in this book, The Talent Code, they talk, as I said, about ignition. And actually the children in elementary schools, they're assigned to their classes, and each class has a poster of a college for them to visit. And in 5th grade, they also go on field trips to colleges. And to us, that sounds crazy because why are you thinking about college in 5th grade? And that's probably why we're not all as this sounds bad, but we're not all as talented as we probably could be. These kids are being ignited so young to just aspire to go to college, and they're definitely gonna be further. In the book, they did talk about their rates of graduating, the KIPP schools, their graduation rates, and the kids going off to college, and I believe it was 80% or something. It was ridiculously higher than any other kind of schools around those areas that the KIPP schools students came from. So yeah, the KIPP schools really interested me, and that was just a really cool thing to see in the book that I definitely want to look more into. The last step of the talent code is master coaching, which I don't know if I believe in. Well, I do believe in master coaching, but I don't think it's as important as the other 2 steps. I think deep practice and ignition are definitely much more important, but whatever, that's okay. In the book, it says that a master coach is someone who had promising talents in their field that they're teaching, but failed and are trying to figure out why, which I thought was a really cool thing to think about. And I definitely could see that in some of my coaches where they have previously played these sports that I'm that I used to try, and they're just kind of just learning more about the sport with us, and I thought that was really cool. The book said that master coaches tailor their coaching towards their students or the individuals that they're teaching, and they also deliver their their coaching as it compared it to a GPS navigation system, saying that it was urgent and clinical, but also pointing out their errors and just kind of further helping the individual learn. And as I said, I think master coaching is important, but I definitely don't think it's as important as the other 2. If you were to pick, I know you can't pick 2 to have, but if you were to pick 2 that you would have, I would definitely master coaching. I feel is not as important as the other 2. It definitely could help. I mean, as the book said, it said the convergence of the 3 is the best, but I definitely feel there is a definite order of the most important elements. And yeah, so although I don't believe in they're all equal, all elements, I think it did say something about that in the book, how they're all equal. I definitely don't think that, but I do definitely really enjoy this book, and it was a really good read. I definitely would recommend it to like anyone, and I definitely think it will help me like later on in the future with my own kids, like the KIPP schools and stuff. I definitely want to look at those, and I'm just really interested in like how I can like further grow my talent. And I think the one big thing that I was thinking about like throughout reading the book is how it's like not a lot of people know about this, and I think it would definitely further us as a society if like everyone did know about the talent code and like what to do. But just thinking about how many like great talents we could have if everyone knew about that, like this book, and it's just absolutely insane to think about. Like I could be like an amazing like chess player if I wanted to. I just like aren't. Like there's so many like talents that may just be suppressed because they don't know about deep practice, ignition, and master coaching. And I think that's just absolutely insane to think about, like how great of a like world we could have if just everyone knew how to like further talent. And it's just crazy to think about. It kind of like blows my mind every time I think about it. But yes. So I wanted to end my book talk with a major quote in this book, and as I said, I do recommend that everyone like reads this book because I think it will definitely like just further us as a society completely. But there is like one major quote that is said throughout the whole book, and that is that it just again sums up the like whole idea of the book. But skill is insulation that wraps neural circuits and grows according to certain signals, which again is just like a further explanation, or not a further but like a kind of like more simplified sentence of just like what everything is about the talent code. And so yeah, I would really recommend reading this book. As I said, I think if everyone read this book, the world would be absolutely insanely talented. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but I do definitely recommend you read this book. And yeah, thank you for watching.